Imagine spitting into a tube for a fun family DNA test and discovering you're supposedly a missing child, but you're sitting right here, 57 years old. That's exactly what happened to me. I thought it would be simple, just a little peek into my ancestry, maybe learn if I had Irish or Scottish roots, or check if I carried any health markers I should warn my kids about. I didn't expect to have my entire sense of self shaken to its core. When the email came back, it wasn't some distant cousin in Montana or a health tip about cholesterol. No. It said my DNA matched a girl who vanished without a trace more than 50 years ago. A little girl whose face had once been plastered on missing posters, whose parents died never knowing what happened to her. And somehow, the test was saying, that girl was me. I stared at that screen, my hands shaking, my heart pounding, thinking, this must be some kind of mistake. But what if it wasn't? How could my DNA match a girl who disappeared decades ago, when I've lived my whole life right here? And what if my life isn't the story I thought it was? My name is Margaret, and at 55 years old, I thought I had life pretty well figured out. I'm a grandmother of 3, a retired elementary school teacher, and I live in a quiet little town where the biggest excitement is when the high school football team makes it to the state playoffs. My days are filled with Sunday dinners with the kids, a quilting club that meets at the library, and Wednesday night Bible study at church. To anyone looking in, my life would seem as ordinary as they come, steady, warm, predictable. That's exactly why I ordered the DNA test. I wasn't searching for drama or mystery. Honestly, I was curious about ancestry. My husband, God rest his soul, always joked that my stubborn streak had to be Irish, while my son insisted I had German roots. I wanted to know the truth. Plus, the health insights sounded useful, something to pass on to my children and grandchildren. When the little kit arrived in the mail, it felt almost silly. Spit in a tube, seal it, ship it off. That was it. I didn't think twice about it. A few weeks later, I nearly forgot I had even done it. Life went on as usual, potlucks at the community center, grocery trips where I always ran into someone I knew, and evenings where I curled up on the couch with a good mystery novel. My world was comfortable, familiar, safe. And then the email arrived. At first, I thought it was just going to tell me whether my ancestors came from Ireland or Germany. But instead, the subject line made my heart stop, close relative match detected. I clicked, expecting maybe a cousin I hadn't heard of. But what I saw on the screen made the room spin. It wasn't just a relative. It was a name. A name I didn't recognize, yet one I would come to learn was tied to a decades-old disappearance. A missing girl. And according to the results, she wasn't just related to me. She was me. I sat there staring at the email, blinking as though my eyes had played a trick on me. Close relative match detected, missing person case from 1970s. I actually laughed at first. A clerical error, I thought. Maybe the lab mixed up the samples. These things happen, right? But when I clicked deeper into the report, the details jumped out in bold print. According to their database, my DNA wasn't just a close match, it was a direct identity hit for a girl named Anna Collins, who had disappeared in 1971 at just 6 years old. I froze. 6 years old. 1971, that would have made her almost exactly my age. The thought made my stomach twist. When I told my kids, they laughed at first. Mom, that's wild. You've always said you love true crime podcasts, now you're part of one, my son joked. My daughter teased, guess you've got a secret twin hiding somewhere. But when I showed them the official-looking report, their smiles faded. That night, my oldest son did what sons do, he Googled. And there it was, old black and white photos of Anna Collins plastered on missing posters, a shy smile framed by a pageboy haircut. The story said she'd vanished after leaving school one afternoon in a small Midwestern town. No trace, no leads, just gone. And then came the detail that made the hair rise on the back of my neck, that small Midwestern town was right here in my own state. It was too close. Too eerie. My daughter frowned and said softly, Mom, what if this isn't a mistake? I brushed it off, but later that night, alone in bed, I couldn't shake the thought. My childhood suddenly felt foggy, patchy. Why were there so few photos of me before first grade? Why did my birth certificate look like it had been reissued years later? I had always accepted my family's answers without question. But now, those answers felt fragile. What if everything I thought I knew about my life, my name, my history, my family, wasn't the truth? And that's when the panic set in. If this story has you hooked already, don't forget to hit subscribe, because what happened next only gets stranger, and you won't want to miss it. The next morning, I did what any curious, half-terrified grandmother would do. I went digging. I typed Anna Collins missing 1971 into the search bar, and within seconds, a flood of old newspaper clippings and archived stories appeared on my screen. Most were scanned from yellowed papers, the kind that had probably sat in library archives for decades. Grainy photographs showed Anna's round little face, eyes too big for her age, and the same haircut I wore in my own childhood pictures. I scrolled through accounts of frantic parents, candlelight vigils, and neighbors who claimed they'd seen her walking home from school that afternoon before she vanished. My heart thudded as I clicked deeper. Anna was 6 years old when she disappeared. 6. I was 6 in 1971 too. I checked the dates again and again, hoping I had misread, but no. Anna's birthday was listed as March 14, 1965. Mine? March 18, 1965. 4 days apart. I tried to steady my breathing. Coincidences happen, I told myself. But as I sat there in the glow of my laptop, coincidences began to pile up into something heavier, something darker. I pulled down the old box of family photos from the attic. I'd looked through them 100 times before: birthdays, Christmas mornings, backyard barbecues. But as I sifted through them with fresh eyes, a chill ran through me. There were no pictures of me as a baby. The earliest photo was from kindergarten, me in a hand-me-down dress, smiling shyly at the camera. I had never questioned it before. My mother always said film was expensive, and back then, they hadn't owned a good camera. But now, that explanation felt thin. I found my birth certificate tucked into an envelope at the bottom of the box. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Something about it struck me as strange. The date of issue wasn't from the 1960s. It was from 1975, 10 years after I was supposedly born. I read it 3 times, my vision blurring. Memories I hadn't thought about in years began bubbling up. Why did my mother always grow tense when I asked about my early childhood? Why did she dodge questions about where we lived before I was old enough to remember? I thought of the neighbor lady who once, half-jokingly, had called me the little mystery child. At the time, everyone laughed it off. But now? It didn't feel so funny. I shut the box quickly, my heart pounding in my ears. What if my life wasn't what I thought it was? What if the DNA test wasn't wrong at all? I stared at the photo of Anna Collins one more time, her dark eyes gazing back at me across 50 lost years. And that's when it hit me. There was only one person who could give me the answers I needed. My mother. I drove to my mother's house the next morning, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I could see the whites of my knuckles. She's 80 now, frail, her hair a soft cloud of white, but her eyes, sharp as ever, still carry the weight of secrets. I sat across from her in the living room, the old grandfather clock ticking like a metronome of my racing heartbeat. For a while, I couldn't bring myself to say it. I asked about her garden, about the church ladies, anything but what I came for. And then finally, the words tumbled out. Mom, who am I really? Her knitting needles froze midair. She looked at me, confused, maybe even scared. What kind of question is that? She asked. I showed her the DNA report, my voice trembling as I explained. Her eyes skimmed the page, and in that instant, something flickered across her face, recognition, maybe guilt. She set the paper down slowly, her hand shaking. Margaret, she whispered, some things were never meant to be dug up. My chest tightened. So it's true? Am I Anna Collins? her eyes filled with tears. "No, you are not that girl. But, you are not exactly who you think you are, either." The room seemed to tilt. She told me how, in the early 1970s, a young couple from out of state had asked for help. They were in trouble, couldn't care for their child, and my parents, desperate for a daughter after years of miscarriages, took me in. No courts, no lawyers, no adoption papers. Just an unspoken agreement sealed with desperation and secrecy. "You were a gift," she said, her voice breaking. "We raised you as our own. We loved you as our own." I wanted to believe her, but anger and confusion burned in my chest. Why hadn't she told me? Why had my entire childhood been wrapped in silence? And still, a darker question gnawed at me. If I wasn't Anna, then what about the real missing girl? Where was she? I thought of the parents who had died never knowing what happened to their child. The headlines, the posters, the unanswered prayers. And here I was, alive, tangled in their tragedy by nothing more than strands of DNA. I reached for my mother's hand, torn between love and betrayal. "Mom, all my life, I thought I knew who I was. But now, I don't even know what's real anymore." She squeezed my hand softly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "The love we gave you, that's what's real." But love couldn't erase the mystery. And as I left her house that night, one truth clung to me like a shadow: the missing girl's story was still unsolved. What would you do if you uncovered a secret like this in your own family? Let me know in the comments, and if this story has gripped you, subscribe now. The conclusion is just around the corner, and it changes everything. The weeks that followed were a blur of phone calls, emails, and sleepless nights. My children insisted I speak with the DNA testing company, and soon, even a local investigator got involved. Every day, I dreaded the ring of the phone, half afraid they'd tell me I wasn't Margaret at all, that my whole life had been borrowed from someone else's tragedy. But when the results finally came back, the truth was less dramatic, and yet, somehow, more haunting. I was not Anna Collins. My DNA had matched hers because of something called a distant cousin relationship. The databases used for consumer tests often stretch their nets wide, flagging close connections where only faint genetic echoes exist. Somewhere, deep in the tangled branches of my family tree, there had been a link, enough to spark a false identity match. I should have felt relief. And I did. I was Margaret. My life, my children, my grandchildren, all still mine. Yet I couldn't shake the ache in my chest as I thought about Anna's family. They never got their relief. For them, the waiting had no ending. The posters faded, the headlines stopped, but their pain lived on. That night, as I tucked away the papers and tried to reclaim normalcy, I sat by the window watching the streetlights glow. I thought about how fragile identity really is, how a few strands of DNA can send your whole life spinning, and how many families are still out there, waiting for answers that may never come. I whispered a prayer for Anna Collins, wherever she may be. And then another for every missing child whose face never made the news. But just as I began to breathe easier, a final message landed in my inbox. It wasn't from the DNA company this time. It was from someone who claimed to know the truth about Anna's disappearance, and my connection to it. Life is a strange thing. One moment, it feels steady and predictable, quilting circles, Sunday dinners, and the quiet routines of a grandmother's life. And the next, a simple DNA test can unravel decades of certainty and force you to question everything you thought you knew. I may not be Anna Collins, but her shadow will always linger in my story. That false match opened my eyes to how fragile our sense of self really is, and how many families out there are still living in limbo, waiting for a call that never comes. I carry their grief with me now, even as I hold tighter to my own children and grandchildren, grateful for the life I do have. In the end, I realized something: we are more than our DNA. We are the people we love, the lives we build, and the truths we choose to carry forward. But that last message I received, the one claiming to know what really happened to Anna? That's a story I'm not sure I'm ready to tell just yet. If this journey gripped you, share this video, subscribe, and let's honor the families still searching for their missing loved ones. Because their stories matter too.